This is a recording of the KC Secular AA speaker meeting held every Saturday night at 7 o'clock p.m. at HJ's Youth and Community Center, 6425 Warner Road, Kansas City, Missouri. This is episode 13, and our speaker is Cana C.
All right, welcome to the Secular Speaker Meeting. I'm Simon, and I'm an alcoholic, and I've asked Emily to read the preamble.
AA is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover. We have no dues or fees for membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help others to achieve sobriety.
Hey, Doug. Our secular group attempts to maintain a tradition of free expression and to conduct a meeting where all may feel free to express any doubts or disbeliefs that they may have and to share their own personal form of spiritual experience, their search for it or their rejection of it. In keeping with AA tradition, we do not endorse nor oppose any form of religion or atheism. Our only wish is to help those who want recovery without having to accept anyone else's beliefs or having to deny their own. During the meeting, I'll pass around the little basket if you'd like to help contribute to coffee and cause of the podcast, rent, stuff like that. It's appreciated, but not necessary. We recognize extended periods of sobriety. Is there anybody celebrating any number of, any kind of lengths of sobriety? Meeting will begin with a 20-30 minute speaker tonight from Cana. See what she has in store, and then afterwards we'll pass around the mic, and if you'd like to discuss anything that's on your mind, you're more than welcome. If you'd like to reflect on what you've heard, it's also appropriate. If you don't want to share it all, that's also okay. Some of us will introduce ourselves as alcoholics, but you can introduce yourself however you feel comfortable. And this is an open meeting, so anybody else who's not an alcoholic is also welcome. If you've got friends or family that would be interested in sharing the experience, bring them along. On that note, we record this meeting. We put it online. It's available to the public. So if for some reason you get past the microphone tonight and you do not wish to participate, you can pass it right along. If you just don't want to be included in the podcast, but you do have something to say, there's an off button on the microphone. You can switch that off, or you can just let me or John know after the meeting, and we'll edit everything right out. I think that's all the business. Cana? It's all you.
Oh, yeah, okay. So, I'm Cana, and I'm an alcoholic. I have 11 months and 3 days of sobriety, so I have lots of insight to share about how to stay sober. And so I didn't get as much notice as some people do when they're going to do this meeting. So if I'm whatever, you'll have to forgive me. Neither one of my parents are alcoholics. But I've had some, alcoholics in my family. I won't get into who and everything, but, my mom likes to mention that I was a 2-time DARE graduate, which is, the program they have or had in school, which is drug abuse resistance education. Whenever she talks about how, the way that I went with, drinking and, smoking pot. But, I was very much opposed to it until I don't know exactly what happened. My first drink was at a very fancy wedding reception where I was allowed to have one sip of, champagne that they had at the table. And I don't really think of course I didn't really feel anything from that, but I was like 13 or 14 years old, and, it was fine. But growing up, I was a very quiet child that kept to myself, and I didn't make many friends. We moved around a lot, so it was very difficult for me. I hated moving. We would move, and I would have to be uprooted, and I didn't like change. I still don't like change a lot, although I'm getting better at that. So I'm all over the place, but When I got into high school, I guess I really wanted to be one of the cool kids. And I really, was really into like rock and roll music and kind of partying. And I had this idea of how my life should be, which is like very kind of nice and fancy, but also kind of rock and roll and rebellious. And that involved, drinking and stuff like that. And so I made an effort to become friends with the people who I thought were cool, and they were really into like drinking and smoking pot and stuff like that. And so I made friends with them, but we started drinking and stuff like that. And I was really obsessed with it as a teenager. Like, I started smoking cigarettes, and that's another thing that I still do now, but, that was a big thing for me. I remember once my mom, we never kept much alcohol in the house, at least not at my mom's house. And one time she did buy like a case of like a 6-pack of Sam Adams beer, and she drank one, but there were 5 more in the fridge. And I thought it would be fun because during the summer I didn't have anything to do. And so I ended up drinking like 4 of the 5, and I filled them back up with water. And I thought that those would just end up sitting in the fridge indefinitely. And so I just didn't worry about it. But then like my dad came over once for dinner, and she wanted to have a beer. And so my mom gave her one. And of course, most of them were filled with water. And so like they asked us about that, like, why did this happen? And I thought, I am found out. But like at the last minute, I said that I poured them out, and because I thought it was wrong that she would have it in the house, because she would sometimes talk kind of badly about people she knew, who, especially because she was a minister, and she would know people in the church who would like drink and kind of make fools of themselves. And I thought it was hypocritical that she would be saying that. And so I didn't get any trouble for that. But, I somehow, and my brother knew, and he was there too. And I'm like, he's going to tell on me about this, but he didn't. And, so that I was like 15 then. Kids, I think it's hard for teenagers because unless you have like sports or whatever, you don't have a whole lot to do. It kind of makes sense that you would get into trouble, and so I feel kind of like you have to give kids more options as to what they can do when they're not in school. But we would, it's not that remarkable. We would get home. My parents would work, and so they wouldn't be at home. And so we'd, get drunk and smoke pot and stuff like that when we could get it. There was one time I was with a friend, and we were very young teenage girls, and we went, and she was way more, kind of hardcore than I was with drinking and doing drugs. And we ended up we were walking around Westport, we were hanging out, and we happened to cross paths with a friend of hers who was like this hardcore kind of guy who had gotten in a fight with another homeless person, and he had had his jaw wired shut. And we ended up going over to this house where all these homeless people lived, and we ended up getting just completely smashed. And we ended up sitting near Westport, on the Westport, there's a ledge near Westport Presbyterian where we were just completely shit-faced. And her boyfriend at the time came up, and he was just aghast at how messed up we were. And we ended up going to the Vietnam Memorial Park and kind of sleeping there for a little bit because it was, we were so messed up. But she was she had whiskey and stuff like that some of the people at the house had given her. And that was probably the worst time when I was in high school. But, I got to senior year, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wasn't going to college. I ended up taking a couple of college classes or whatever right out of high school, but I didn't know what to do. And so I ended up, I decided I was going to become a stoner. And so I did. I became one, and my brother, people in my life were kind of who were enthusiastic about pot were kind of liked that for some reason, and they thought that would be fun. But I did, and so I would constantly be getting stoned or whatever. and I would end up going to class, and I would be stoned all through class, and like, there were so many times where, like, they must have known, like, I'd roll into class late and I would just, like, you know, my eyes were practically falling out of my head because I was so stoned. And but, I would, when you're not 21, it's really hard to get booze. But, like, I had some older friends who would get it for me, and we always liked the cheap stuff, like McCormick's, like the big, like, jugs of, like, McCormick's whiskey or vodka. And I remember one time I got alcohol poisoning, but I didn't go to the hospital. I was sick for like 2 days, and it was so bad. I remember like asking my brother to get me water at one point, and he's just like, I'll do it, but you did this to yourself. It's like, so mean. But like, anyway, the years between 2008 and 2011 I know that they happen because time is linear and I lived through that time, but I don't remember much of anything. Like, my mother's job would take her kind of away from the house, at least like 1 week a month during the year. And then like every week during like the spring, she would be gone. And so we would I lived with her even after high school, and we would live there, and we would, throw all these parties. We would have friends over all the time. And it was intense. And like, I knew that she would not like it if she knew what was going on, but she knew. She didn't really like that we drank or anything, but she would kind of accepted it, and she didn't really make a big deal out of it. She knew that she couldn't really do anything about it. And so, I would get sick a lot. That was my thing. I would get sick a lot from drinking. And so, I mean, I would be like sick all day long, and I would just throw up and throw up and throw up. And my room was just a mess all the time. I'd wake up and I would like look at all the things and think, like, did I do this while I was drunk, or was it always like this? It was just, I was just kind of horrified by it. And I would wake up and like, anyway, it was mostly hard liquor for a while, but I would get into trouble online, and I just decided, you know what, I gotta stop that. So I just started drinking wine mostly, which is really, I for a long time, I could tell you what the alcohol content of pretty much every cheap wine there was, because I would always go around the store and try to find the strongest one. I remember once seeing one for like 14.5%, but that was like $15, so I didn't get it. But like, I didn't have a job for most of this, which is another thing that allowed me to drink the way that I was. It's possible I would have met consequences a lot sooner if I had to work, but it was during the recession, and there just weren't a lot of jobs. And I did work some for my dad. And I remember once early on, and like after I graduated, I was trying to leave in the afternoon to go to work, and I had this whiskey, and I kept I had to have just a little bit more before I left. And like, I remember we had a speaker in high school once saying, like, if you can't just have one, then that you're probably an alcoholic. And I thought, like, maybe this means I'm an alcoholic, but I was just like, whatever. And so, I made a practice that I still kind of do, but now it's harder to do, that I just wouldn't deal with problems that I had. Like, I would cause problems, but I also just wouldn't deal with the ones in my life. And I guess I felt like I just didn't have a choice. Like, I just felt like I didn't have, mental health resources. I had been throughout high school on concentration medicines, including Ritalin and Strattera, and Adderall. And I'd had a psychiatrist for that, but I don't know. I didn't really think that I could get that, because I'd have to ask my mom and everything, and she'd want to know why, and she could kind of hover a little bit, and it bothered me. But I would get sick, and I don't know why I put up. I mean, I know why I put up with it, but like, it was really difficult to deal with all the time. And so I would get bad for a while, and then I'd kind of manage to peel back when I realized I wasn't physically addicted. Sometimes I would worry, like, am I drinking so much that I'm like actually like, if I would go through withdrawals, but that never really happened for me. And I would go for most of the between 2007 when I graduated high school and through 2011, I was in school and I was at Penn Valley, the community college, for a while. And then I decided I was going to transfer to UMKC. And I thought UMKC was going to be the greatest thing ever. I thought it was going to be so great because it was going to be like a real college. I was going to, be a part of that. And when I got there, like I was 22. And most of the other kids in my class were 18, and I just felt so out of place, and I was just so angry about it. And I just thought, I for a while I thought that like I drank because I was angry at them for not being what I wanted them to be, or me for not, but now I realize that the drinking was probably part of what made me angry. And so that was later on I realized that, but I would drink like every day. I would drink really quickly in the evenings, and I would just I would get drunk really fast. And that was really kind of my goal with that. Like, I didn't like to sit around and kind of nurse anything. I had to, fit it into my schedule. And so I did. And it got to a point where I was drinking every day. And so finally one morning I was really sick. And I wasn't throwing up or anything yet, but I knew that it was really bad. And I went to school, and I was in this literature class where it was like, they were talking about this. It was in this book, and it was about this woman who miscarried a child, and it was what it was described as black blood coming out of her, and it almost made me puke because it was so gross. And I didn't throw up somehow, but I was just so upset. And after that class, like, I ended up running to some bathroom in some empty building somewhere, and I called my mom and I told her that I was just drinking so much and I just couldn't stand it. I was crying. She came and got me, and so I tried for about 4 days to not drink. And by the fourth day or third day, really, I just couldn't stand it anymore. And I didn't have enough money to get what I usually got. So I'm like, well, I'll get a Mickey's or, Mickey's beer or something because that'll be cheaper. But I went to the store and they had what I usually got on sale. So I was able to get it. And so I kept it a secret from her for a little while, but then she realized, and she was just like, I'm so disappointed in you. And I was like, well, we'll have to learn how to live with your disappointment. And so I thought, drunk me thought that was brilliant. But eventually that was the fall semester, and towards the end of the year, I would buy one bottle of wine every day to try and give myself the chance to not go drink the next day, but I always did. And so I ended up getting bigger bottles of wine. I would just drink one, as much as I wanted of that. And then I'd get a smaller one anyway, towards the end of the year, I knew that my mom wanted to move back to her hometown because she wanted to do that. And I was afraid that she was going to leave me there in her apartment by myself. And so I said, I want to move out. And she was like, okay. And then she offered to put me up in an apartment. And I eventually did that. And that helped me a lot. So I go there, and that eventually did help me a lot, but I move out. I'm still drinking a lot. And then the day of the Super Bowl, we watch the Super Bowl, and I go home and I get drunk. And then the next day I wake up at 5 with the worst pain in my back or my front. I can't really remember which one it was, but I knew it was related to drinking because as someone who has a uterus, you have all kinds of different pains, and you get used to kind of knowing what's normal and what's not. And that was not normal. And so I realized it was related to drinking. I thought it might have been my kidneys. I don't know. But so I realized that I would have to stop drinking, and eventually, over time, I didn't think that I would ever be able to do it completely, but I didn't really think so much about the future. And then I met up with a friend of mine who sold weed, and so I started smoking weed all the time instead. And I was able to do that all day long because it didn't have the physical effect that alcohol did. But eventually, I was paranoid all the time. And one time I went, because I started working for my dad again, and they lived out in this house that was out kind of in a bad part of town. And my dad's partner came and got me, and I didn't see my dad anywhere because normally I'd hear her somewhere in the house. And I'm so stoned, I'm paranoid. I'm did her partner murder her? And I was like convinced. And I'm like, I have to sneak upstairs to see if she's up there. And I was like kind of really freaked out. But eventually I heard her and she was like, she was not murdered. Still alive and well. Everything's great. But, that, and I wanted to stop hanging out with my friend who was dealing because she was just not a good person at all to be around. And one day I was sitting in my kitchen, like kind of as far from my front door as I could get, smoking. And I had CNN in the other room on. And this was when bath salts were kind of more popular than they are now. And they would kind of make people kind of crazy. And one thing that they would do is sometimes that they would end up eating other people because they were hallucinating so bad. And this was 2012. This was 2012, and it was like when the world was supposed to end because of the Mayans. And I thought, what if the world is going to end and there's going to be this zombie apocalypse? I knew that I would not last very long. It wouldn't be like in The Walking Dead where I would try and survive this, because it didn't sound like much fun anyway. And I'm really small and I'm not very strong, and I wouldn't be able to, Anyway, I decided I had to live the rest of my life, rest of the 6 months, the second half of 2012 to the fullest and I would do this by, I didn't want to be stoned and I didn't want to be drinking. So I decided I'm going to be sober and I want to live the rest of my life sober. And so I did that it was really hard because you don't have physical withdrawal from pot, but it was I would start crying if I didn't have it by noon, and it was difficult. But anyway, so I get through the end of the year and I lose my job with my dad. The company that they sold their things through went under, actually it's still online. But anyway, I ended up moving to Carbondale with my mom, who had moved there, and I lived there for a while, and I didn't drink there, and I started seeing a therapist there, but I just buckled down for a while. I was able to kind of just sit and do nothing because I was supposed to find a job, but I would just sit at home and do nothing all day long. I'd read. But eventually I moved back to Kansas City because I insisted on it, and I found a job at a laundry place in town. And it was very grueling work. It was in the middle of summer when I started working there, and I just, if I had been drinking then, I would have probably I wouldn't have been able to do it because I would have just lost everything. And I've attached so much of my self-worth to my job and being able to do it. And I felt really sorry for myself that I had to work in this place that I was one of the few English speaking people there, and I felt like I was not. Eventually I learned, the other ladies who were mostly Mexican immigrants, they managed to work there. They were very nice and even happy a lot of the time. And I thought, well, if they can do it, then I can do it. And I kind of used the really grueling work as a way to punish myself. At one point, I was doing this thing where I would kind of walk around in the hottest part. I mean, it was so hot, I would start shaking. It was so hot, but sorting clothes and, reaching up way above my head, and it was just murder on my shoulders. Eventually, I got the chance to start working in the office there part-time, and I jumped at the chance because I just wanted to get out of the heat. And I remember just when I was asked, I was down, and it was all this fuzz from towels were sticking to me, and it was so gross. And I just threw myself into my job, and I think over time, I looked back on all the time I spent drinking and smoking pot and being irresponsible, and thought that I was just this terrible person for doing it. And I just kind of subconsciously, but also consciously, I would just kind of punish myself. And I felt like this is as good as, you have to spend the rest of your life making up for the fact that you did these things. And really, as much grief as I gave my mother and my family growing up, it really wasn't that bad. It was mostly just punishing myself in a different way than I had been when I was drinking. And so I worked in the office part-time, and then I eventually got to work in there full-time. And then one day they hired another lady, even though I didn't have enough to do in the office all the time. And they hired another lady, and I knew that they were going to pick her, and I thought that they were going to throw me over, and I was just paralyzed with fear. And so I I was constantly afraid. And eventually, like, they just wanted me to go back, work in the plant part-time and work in the office full-time again. But after that, like, the relief, I think, made me want to start drinking again. It was like when I was going through it, I could deal with it. But afterwards, I was just like, I have to start, I just started drinking. Like, and I had thought about it before, like, oh, I'm going to start drinking again, but I never did it. And then I did. And, as hard as I was on myself, I kind of learned through drinking again that, the pull is there. Like, I hadn't experienced that in a while because I had been off it, and I had, done all this work on myself, journaling and trying to learn about the world. And like, I was suddenly in a very different situation there I was before, because before I was worried about my job, and now I was worried about drinking, and I would just think about drinking all day long instead of my job, instead of anything else. It was just drinking. And I had wanted to go to meetings. Like, my mom, when I was at UMKC drinking, she had proposed me going to AA, and I'm like, no, because I didn't like the idea of having to go to meetings for the rest of my life, because I just wanted to be cured and be done. But at the same time, I didn't want to stop. So, and I also was really worried about going to AA because I thought that there were going to be men there, and I was like 22 years old, and I was like, if one even like sort of looks at me, I'm going to freak out. I'm going to hate it. And so I just wouldn't do it. And then finally I got to a point where I was drinking again, and I'm like, I've pushed people away so much throughout my life. That's kind of how I've dealt with, things like drinking. All of the friends I had before, I just wouldn't talk to. And now I can't even go to AA because I made myself able to, drink without it or not drink without it. And so I thought about going, but then, and I Googled this, and We Agnostics was the first one that came up. So I thought in the back of my head, I'll go there. But like, I remember sitting at my desk, and I was hungover and just kind of completely like, I was, I don't even know what to describe it, but I was thinking, I was like, if you do get fired, like, reality is still going on outside your head, even though you're not worried about it the way you were before. If you get fired and you're drinking, then you won't be able to find a new job. You won't be up to that challenge. And so if I decided, well, you wanted to go to AA, you get to go now. And it was St. Patrick's Day weekend was the last time I drank. Well, actually, it was the Monday before I went to meetings. But I knew that if I didn't go after then I wouldn't go. And so I found this place. Well, not this place, but We Agnostics. And it's been really great. And it's just completely changed my life and changed me. And I think that, I don't know where it's going for me. I'm working the steps. I'm on step 4 now. And especially since getting a sponsor, I felt a lot better and going through that. And I feel like I've been more communicative about things. And it's been, I have friends now. I have all this, I'm all of a sudden, all the issues that I've had, I feel like I'm dealing with a little bit better now. And it's been really great. And I am very glad to be here, and I am glad that I was able to take up as much time as I have, because I was afraid that I wouldn't have stuff to say. But I'm glad to have been able to share my story, and I hope to have many more good things to say about AA in the future as I spend more time in it.
All right. Thank you, Cana. Emily, would you like to start?
Cana, thank you for sharing your story. It was wonderful. You bring a lot of humor to something that I think is very painful for all of us deep down, but I think it's important to laugh when we can. So, thank you for sharing.
I'm Cass, I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Cass.
It was so cool to hear you speak, and I was very excited when I heard that you were going to. I remember I think I was there for your first meeting, and I'm so happy for you that you've stayed with it. It's been really cool to see you open up more, and feel more comfortable around us, and more comfortable with yourself. It's really cool. It's really I don't know. AA is so much easier. Like being sober is so much easier than I thought it would be. I was so scared of it. I didn't even imagine, like, couldn't even imagine it being possible. And now sometimes I'm like, it's hard for me to imagine living the life that I used to live, you know? And I definitely relate to a lot of the stuff that you've gone through. And I mean, that's so true for any alcoholic sharing in these meetings. You know, we have a lot to relate about. I don't know. I guess I don't have a whole lot to share tonight. I'm just feeling very happy to be a part of this community. So that's it for tonight.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jenny. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Jenny.
I'm glad to be here. I'm glad all you guys are here, and I'm glad you're here. This is my husband, Maury, who's kind of become part of our family. And I'm really glad you're here, especially glad you're here. I have loved working with you so much. Thank you so much. I don't know how much you get out of it, but I get a lot out of it working with you. And it's wonderful to work the steps again from a secular perspective. It's great. One of the things you said reminded me of the physical pain of drinking, and that was when your organs started to hurt. And I had forgotten that. And so thank you. Because it's just everything inside me hurt. And that was bad. And so thanks for that memory. And we all have so much in common. Whenever I hear somebody else's story, there's just barely anything that I can't relate to. So I love to I'm always hesitant to say I love to watch you grow because it sounds kind of condescending, and I really do not mean it in that way. But I love to get to know you, I guess, and to see you open up. It's great. It's just great. And so thanks, everybody. I'll pass.
Hello, I'm Maury.
Maury.
Thank you for sharing the story. When Jenny and you get together, she never says what y'all talk about, but I always happy that you are, because she comes home happy. So thank you for that.
I'm Douglas, and I'm an alcoholic. Thank you, Cana. I remember when you came to me to ask, "Hey, what's it like to have a sponsor? How do I go about getting a sponsor? What should I do?" It's great to hear that you have. There's been some time since you've had your sponsor and what you've been able to accomplish, and that you're happy. Like if you could talk to you back then and be like, "Yeah, everything's gonna be cool. Just go for it already." So that was interesting. And I agree with Emily. You do keep the mood light. You randomly to send me like cat gifs and videos, and the first time that she did it was like at the most perfect moment. I was having a really stressful day and felt like what I had put so much work into that day was just going into nothing, and then I get this little message of a cat doing this funny thing, and I was just like, oh my god, thank you, that was perfect. She's like, no problem, anytime, if you need more, I'll send you more. So thank you, I appreciate that.
Hi, I'm Mark. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you for sharing your story, Cana. And I'm really grateful to everyone in We Agnostics just for your kindness and support on my journey of recovery. So thank you.
My name is Tyler. I'm an alcoholic. I'd never been to this group before. Thank you for sharing your story. I enjoyed it. I don't know, speaker meetings were definitely one of the things that first convinced me that AA could be effective for me. Once I heard my story enough times, and I thought this could really work for me. I'm grateful to be here, grateful to be sober. Thank you.
I'm Susan. I'm an alcoholic. Hi. I am excited to hear your story. When I heard you were speaking, I wanted to come hear you speak because I for some reason see a lot of myself through you. I guess because the saying is quiet waters run deep or something like that, and I appreciate your service over the last several months, and I now I know why, in a way, because when I was younger, we moved a lot too, and it was really hard to form relationships, and I see a lot of parallels in our stories, and I really admire your tenacity in coming back, and I used to hate it when people said this to me, but it's really true. We're right where we're supposed to be. And I'm really appreciate your being here, and everyone else. Thank you.
I'm Greg, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi, thanks a lot for talking. I'll be following next week, so I'm taking up notes. It has been good to see you grow. I was really surprised when you took the other meeting, because you seemed so quiet, and that's been really fun for me because you always come with the most interesting topics that you've thought through. It's not just page something on some, and it sparks, I know you've noticed, but it sparks very interesting conversations. So I appreciate that very much. And it's been good to see you, and it's been good to see like a lot of people all kind of revolve around each other and be supportive of each other. You young folk. So we've really grown as a group, I think, because you all are here too. It's really helped us. So I will thank you once more and pass it along.
That's great. Hello, just an alcoholic. I think you were at the first meeting I came to within this group, and to piggyback on what you're saying, just to see consistent faces, I think that's part of why this works. I have found it quite a lot easier than I thought it would be, because it feels, once you kind of get past, I think, like getting over the physical symptoms, and it's like, this is what normal feels like, right? And I think that's really, taking from what your story, it's like, really plugging back into normal, is a good feeling. The organs, living with that for years, like that's just why, so yeah, like it's really good to see consistent people here, and whatever you do share, I always enjoy. So thank you, and I appreciate you sharing more.
Justin. I'm John. I'm an alcoholic. Oh man, thank you very much. I think your story's inspiring, and I'm glad that you're having a good experience, and that you found a good sponsor, and that you're finding some meaning in the steps. But more than anything, I'm just glad that for everything that you've done for the group, and it's just that I can be a part of this, and watching all these people come into the group and have their lives change for the better is just great to be part of that. So thank you.
I'm Deborah, a recovering addict. Cana, thank you for your story. I don't know you, so I'll talk about me. I relate it to two parts. I mean, one is just the awfulness, just how awful we felt. And yours for a really long time, mine too. And yet the gift of being able to just say it without being dramatic, without being fluffing it over or whatever. I've been away from the fellowship for a while because I've been out of the country, where there wasn't this fellowship. So I love that. I love being able to remember how awful it was through you. And then the very fairly quick in your story this time was how good it is now. I'm a little bit forgetting how good it is now. I'm readjusting to the United States of America, which is a little difficult. I left in 2012, so it's really different. I don't know what you guys did while I was gone. I've been in the Peace Corps, so it was a little difficult explaining my country. And then Maybe I'm just going through, it's been 13 and a half years since I last, pounded some vodka. I've been doing other things. And, I think I'm in a period of just, it doesn't feel like an amazing thing to be sober. And yet when I hear you talk, I really get it. I couldn't deal with this if I were having to, certainly drinking, which almost took me out. And there's just the quietness. I'm not despondent. I'm just figuring out who I am at a fairly advanced age. And I'm really grateful to not have the chemicals invading my body and my organs hurting and everything that you described. And it is great. It is great to be sober, and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of you. It's amazing. I'm proud of all of us, whether it's 5 hours since the last time we did what's normal for us. What's normal. So I really appreciate hearing a story. I really appreciate the what it was like, the kind of what happened. I remember that rhythm of a story, that what it was like, it was awful. What happened is so different for all of us, and yet so similar. The what happened was somehow we can't do it anymore, at least for the foreseeable 24 hours, or maybe 6 hours sometimes. So I'm really grateful to be here, and I'm grateful that this is a way to spend a Saturday night with some strangers. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. All right. I remember, I didn't remember to pass the basket. But I do remember when, I don't know if I was here for your first meeting, but when you first started showing up, you almost missed your 30-day coin. You used to sit in the corner, and you were pretty quiet. It's been nice getting to know you. I also used to, I would drink before school. That was my thing. I like to sit in class and be drunk. I don't know. Thanks for being a good friend. Is there anything else you wanted to add that you thought of as we were passing the microphone around?
I think I'm good.
Jenny?
I just wanted to say one more thing. I think you're very brave. And brave, like, I think a lot of us are brave just because we're doing what we're doing, but you took a meeting. I mean, like, that was an incredible act of bravery
they had
to take a meeting.
Yeah, they had it out there, and like I was just like, mine.
Congratulations on doing that. I think you're a very brave person. Yes.
All right. That's a wrap. Thanks, everybody. Good job.
I heard that I clapped.